You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Motivation in agile contexts is less about pushing people harder and more about creating the conditions that naturally encourage exploration, discovery, and responsible risk-taking. When individuals feel intrinsically motivated, driven by autonomy, mastery, and purpose, they are far more willing to test new ideas and learn from outcomes, even under constraints. Experimentation becomes an energizing part of the work rather than a stressful gamble, and risk-taking becomes a thoughtful process rather than reckless behavior. Safe boundaries provide the confidence to try without fear of irreversible harm, while intrinsic motivators sustain the energy to persist. This orientation reframes failure as learning, progress as insight, and success as validated impact. By positioning motivation as the engine of experimentation, leaders shift culture away from compliance and toward curiosity, ensuring that teams can adapt quickly while still acting responsibly. The result is timely, verifiable value, delivered with resilience. Motivation foundations rest on the three core needs of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy gives individuals control over how they approach work, signaling trust in their judgment. Mastery provides the opportunity to improve and stretch skills, satisfying the drive for growth. Purpose ties effort to meaningful outcomes, ensuring that people see their work as part of something larger than themselves. Together, these drivers create durable motivation that does not depend on external incentives. For example, a developer trusted to shape their approach to a feature, given feedback to refine skills, and reminded that the feature improves customer experience will likely sustain higher energy than one measured only by output. Supporting these needs makes experimentation more natural, as people are energized to explore better ways of working. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose transform risk-taking from a burden into an opportunity for personal and collective advancement. Intrinsic motivation differs significantly from extrinsic incentives, and the contrast matters for experimentation. Intrinsic drivers like curiosity, growth, and meaning sustain engagement over the long term. Extrinsic rewards, such as bonuses or output-based metrics, may provide short bursts of activity, but often distort behavior. For instance, when bonuses are tied strictly to volume, teams may prioritize shipping more features quickly, even at the expense of quality or learning. This undermines the very experimentation that could improve long-term outcomes. By contrast, teams motivated by purpose and mastery will pursue ideas that matter, regardless of short-term tallying. Extrinsic incentives are not inherently harmful, but they must be designed carefully to reinforce intrinsic goals rather than replace them. Effective leaders recognize that durable, meaning-driven motivation is the true fuel for creativity and smart risk-taking, while extrinsic mechanisms should serve only as supportive nudges. Psychological safety acts as the precondition for experimentation and risk-taking. Without it, people hide doubts, suppress unproven ideas, and avoid reporting null results. With it, they share openly, propose bold options, and surface failures early, allowing the team to learn before risks escalate. Safety ensures that risk-taking is not equated with personal vulnerability. For example, if a team member can suggest a radical design change without fear of ridicule or reprisal, the group gains the opportunity to test an idea that might otherwise remain hidden. Null results are reframed as valuable insights rather than as wasted effort. Leaders establish this safety by modeling humility, thanking people for candor, and treating setbacks as system signals. With psychological safety in place, experimentation thrives because people know that honesty is respected and that learning, not image protection, is the priority. Outcome-oriented goals channel the energy of motivation into purposeful experimentation. Instead of measuring activity by how much was tried, teams align their tests with clear success signals tied to customer value or risk reduction. For example, a goal might be to reduce onboarding time by a measurable percentage, not just to try new ideas. This framing directs experimentation toward results that matter, filtering out activity for activity's sake. Outcome-oriented goals also make risk-taking proportionate. Ideas are pursued not for novelty, but for their potential impact. When experiments are linked to real outcomes, successes validate progress, and failures generate useful data that refine strategy. The clarity of these goals helps teams prioritize which experiments to run and when to pivot. By orienting around outcomes, motivation remains grounded in delivering value, ensuring that experimentation is disciplined rather than unfocused. Bounded autonomy grants teams freedom within clearly defined guardrails. Teams are empowered to explore, test, and adapt, but boundaries, such as ethics, safety, privacy, and budget, ensure responsibility. This structure prevents autonomy from slipping into chaos while preserving creativity. For example, a team may have latitude to run customer-facing experiments as long as privacy laws are upheld and rollback procedures are in place. Guardrails encourage exploration without risking user trust or organizational integrity. Bounded autonomy reassures stakeholders that freedom is not reckless because standards are explicit. At the same time, it signals trust in the team's ability to self-manage within those boundaries. This balance creates confidence both internally and externally, making risk-taking a sign of maturity rather than irresponsibility. Autonomy, when bounded thoughtfully, becomes a powerful motivator for safe experimentation that still delivers meaningful learning. Learning metrics shift the focus from busyness to progress. Vanity measures, such as number of experiments run, can encourage shallow, unproductive activity. Instead, learning metrics emphasize time to insight, signal quality, and decision velocity. For instance, tracking how quickly a team moves from hypothesis to validated decision provides a clearer measure of responsiveness. Signal quality ensures that data gathered is interpretable and reliable, not ambiguous or misleading. Decision velocity measures how fast evidence translates into concrete direction changes. These metrics reinforce that experimentation is not about volume, but about generating actionable knowledge. They align recognition with truth-seeking behaviors rather than sheer activity. Over time, learning metrics build discipline into experimentation, keeping motivation tied to outcomes. They also reassure stakeholders that risk-taking is purposeful, producing insights that directly improve decision-making and product alignment. Capacity allocation protects space for discovery in the face of delivery pressures. Without explicit allocation, experiments are often postponed indefinitely by urgent tasks. Reserving a stable percentage of capacity ensures that exploration remains continuous. For example, dedicating 10 to 15% of each sprint to experiments guarantees that new ideas are tested even when delivery demands are high. This stability communicates that learning is valued alongside output. It also prevents burnout, since discovery work is planned rather than squeezed in as overtime. Allocated capacity builds trust, showing teams that leadership supports both delivery and exploration. Over time, it creates a culture where experimentation is not an exception but a standard part of work. By protecting discovery, organizations sustain adaptability and innovation, ensuring that motivation is channeled into a reliable flow of learning opportunities. Recognition systems shape culture by signaling what is celebrated. If only successful outcomes are rewarded, people will avoid risk and hide failures. By contrast, when organizations recognize useful learning, thoughtful reversals, and clean rollbacks, they align status with truth-seeking rather than with appearances. For example, a team that abandons a failing feature early after gathering strong evidence should be praised for saving resources, not penalized for failure. Recognition can take the form of public acknowledgement, peer appreciation, or leadership visibility. The key is consistency, recognizing learning outcomes as equal to delivery outcomes. This balance reinforces psychological safety and encourages people to take proportionate risks. Recognition systems thus motivate experimentation by shifting cultural value away from flawless execution and toward honest learning, ensuring that motivation aligns with discovery rather than perfectionism. Failure reframed as data is one of the most liberating practices for motivating experimentation. Mistakes and near misses are inevitable, but how they are interpreted determines whether they erode or strengthen motivation. By treating failures as information about assumptions or system conditions, teams reduce fear and increase candor. For example, if an experiment reveals that a feature fails to improve engagement, the insight is valuable evidence that saves further wasted investment. This reframing reduces concealment, since individuals no longer feel compelled to hide setbacks. It also accelerates correction, as problems are surfaced early. Over time, viewing failure as data embeds resilience into culture, making experimentation less daunting. Motivation grows when people see that honesty is respected and that even unfavorable results contribute to progress. By normalizing failure as learning, organizations keep curiosity alive and risk-taking responsible. Risk appetite articulation clarifies how bold a team should be in different contexts. By defining acceptable exposure levels, confidence thresholds, and stop-loss rules, organizations give teams clarity about boundaries. For instance, a team may have freedom to test interface tweaks with minimal review but require higher-level approval for experiments involving sensitive data. Articulating risk appetite prevents paralysis because people know where exploration is encouraged and where caution is necessary. It also prevents recklessness, since limits are explicit. By aligning appetite with strategy, leaders ensure that risks are proportionate to potential rewards. Teams gain confidence to act boldly where appropriate, without overstepping or second-guessing. This clarity channels motivation productively, reducing ambiguity about what is acceptable. Risk appetite articulation turns experimentation into a shared responsibility, ensuring that courage and prudence operate together. Cognitive diversity enriches experimentation by improving the quality of ideas and interpretations. Diverse perspectives broaden hypothesis generation, strengthen risk spotting, and refine interpretation of ambiguous signals. For example, a technically skilled engineer might focus on performance metrics, while a user experience specialist highlights usability concerns, and together they design more balanced experiments. Diversity also reduces groupthink, challenging assumptions that might otherwise remain invisible. Encouraging varied input requires deliberate inclusion, inviting voices across roles, disciplines, and backgrounds into the discovery process. Teams motivated by diversity see experimentation as a collaborative act rather than an individual one, increasing both creativity and reliability. Over time, this diversity-driven approach strengthens outcomes, because experiments are tested against multiple lenses of scrutiny. Cognitive diversity not only fuels better ideas, but also reinforces trust, as individuals feel their perspectives contribute meaningfully to shared learning. Small batch testing embodies the principle of learning quickly and safely. By limiting scope and blast radius, teams increase the number of safe attempts they can make. For example, testing a new checkout flow with 100 users rather than the entire customer base reduces downside risk while still generating meaningful data. Small batches make failures manageable and recoverable, keeping motivation intact even when results are negative. They also encourage more frequent trials, since the cost of each is lower. This rhythm builds a culture where experimentation is constant and integrated, not sporadic and daunting. Over time, small batch testing compounds learning, as many incremental insights add up to significant knowledge. It is a practical mechanism for embedding risk-taking into daily work without jeopardizing stability, ensuring that motivation to experiment remains high and consequences remain proportionate. Transparent reasoning strengthens both trust and alignment during experimentation. By sharing not just decisions but the why behind trials, teams prevent confusion and reduce suspicion. For example, explaining that a feature was tested to validate an assumption about user navigation patterns allows others to understand the intent, even if the outcome is inconclusive. Transparent reasoning also accelerates adaptation, since stakeholders can align quickly when results prompt a pivot. Without it, changes may appear arbitrary, undermining confidence. By making rationale visible, teams reinforce that experiments are purposeful and evidence-driven. This openness motivates people to contribute, since they see how their work connects to broader goals. Transparent reasoning ensures that experimentation is not just about testing ideas, but about cultivating shared understanding of why those tests matter. It turns discovery into a collaborative narrative rather than an opaque sequence of actions. Ethics and compliance boundaries are essential to ensure that experimentation remains responsible. Fast-paced learning must not externalize harm onto users or compromise legal obligations. Integrating privacy, fairness, and regulatory expectations into experiments prevents reckless behavior. For example, a marketing experiment that collects personal data must comply with privacy laws and safeguard sensitive information. Similarly, algorithms tested for personalization must be reviewed for bias to avoid unfair outcomes. Setting these boundaries clearly does not stifle experimentation, it legitimizes it, reassuring stakeholders that learning is pursued with integrity. Teams motivated within ethical guardrails can explore confidently, knowing they are safe from unintended harm. Over time, this builds trust, ensuring that speed and responsibility coexist. Ethics and compliance alignment make experimentation sustainable, balancing boldness with accountability and demonstrating that motivation to learn never overrides duty of care. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Hypothesis templates are one of the simplest yet most powerful tools for disciplined experimentation. They turn vague hunches into testable propositions by capturing 4 essential elements: the problem being addressed, the assumption behind the solution, the expected signal that would validate or refute it, and the decision stakes attached. For example, a hypothesis might state, "We believe reducing form fields from 6 to 3 will increase signups by 20%, and if validated, we will standardize shorter forms." By structuring ideas this way, teams clarify intent, reduce ambiguity, and make evaluation easier. Templates also encourage ownership by assigning clear responsibility for each test. This transparency reduces the risk of endless debate, since outcomes are judged against explicit criteria rather than opinions. Over time, hypothesis templates build a culture where experimentation is normalized, evidence is respected, and decisions are tied directly to tested learning rather than intuition. Experiment portfolio management ensures that limited capacity for discovery is used wisely. Not every idea can be tested, so teams prioritize learning bets based on risk, potential impact, and cost of delay. High-risk, high-value experiments may be pursued first, while low-value or redundant trials are deferred. For example, if 2 features are under consideration but one addresses a critical compliance risk, that experiment takes precedence. Managing experiments as a portfolio prevents scattershot efforts and aligns testing with strategy. It also ensures balance between exploratory, high-uncertainty bets and incremental improvements. Leaders and teams can visualize the portfolio, making trade-offs explicit and visible to stakeholders. By treating experiments as investments, portfolio management transforms curiosity into disciplined learning. The result is a steady flow of insights that are both relevant and impactful, ensuring that motivation translates into focused, responsible exploration rather than unfocused activity. Progressive delivery practices give teams the technical means to experiment safely in live environments. Techniques such as feature flags, release rings, and canary deployments expose changes to targeted cohorts rather than the entire user base. This approach improves signal quality while limiting user impact. For example, a new recommendation engine might be released to 5% of customers, allowing the team to gather performance and engagement data before expanding rollout. If issues arise, the change can be reversed quickly without broad disruption. Progressive delivery makes experimentation safer, encouraging more frequent trials because the consequences of failure are bounded. It also generates higher quality evidence, since real-world usage is tested incrementally. These practices make adaptation continuous, rather than episodic, reinforcing a culture where experimentation is routine. By lowering the perceived and actual risk of testing, progressive delivery strengthens motivation to explore and innovate responsibly. Kill-switch protocols and rollback readiness normalize reversals, making them routine rather than extraordinary. In agile environments, not every experiment will succeed, and the ability to stop quickly is essential. Kill switches provide immediate control to disable a feature, while rollback procedures ensure systems can revert to a stable state. For example, if a new payment option introduces errors, a kill switch allows the team to disable it instantly while investigating. By rehearsing and embedding these practices, teams reduce the fear of failure. Rollbacks become part of normal operation, not evidence of incompetence. This lowers the emotional and organizational cost of experimentation, motivating people to try more ideas. Stakeholders also gain confidence, knowing that even if something goes wrong, safeguards are in place. Kill-switch protocols and rollback readiness create a safety net that makes smart risk-taking a reliable, trusted part of delivery. Pre-mortems and risk reviews help teams anticipate failure modes before launching experiments. A pre-mortem asks the team to imagine that the experiment failed and then brainstorm reasons why. This exercise surfaces blind spots and allows mitigations to be designed in advance. For example, a team planning a new onboarding flow might predict that users could abandon midway due to unclear instructions, prompting them to add additional guidance. Risk reviews formalize this process, aligning stakeholders on acceptable exposure and defining triggers for stopping. By anticipating problems, teams build confidence in their readiness and reduce the likelihood of unpleasant surprises. Pre-mortems also create psychological safety by normalizing discussion of potential failure, reducing stigma when setbacks occur. Together, these practices ensure that risk-taking is deliberate and informed, motivating teams to experiment with courage because they have already considered and prepared for possible downsides. Capability building equips teams with the skills needed to run high-quality experiments. Without literacy in areas such as design of experiments, telemetry, and causal reasoning, tests may generate ambiguous or misleading results. Training and mentoring close these gaps, ensuring that experiments are designed and interpreted with confidence. For instance, learning how to isolate variables prevents teams from drawing false conclusions from complex data. Building telemetry skills ensures that evidence is captured reliably and efficiently. Causal reasoning sharpens judgment, distinguishing correlation from causation. Leaders who invest in these capabilities reinforce motivation by showing that experimentation is a valued skill, not a risky distraction. Over time, teams become more autonomous in discovery, reducing reliance on external experts and accelerating cycles of learning. Capability building turns experimentation into a professional strength, ensuring that motivation is backed by competence and that risk-taking produces trustworthy insights. Calibration coaching aligns actual behaviors with stated risk appetite. Teams may claim they are willing to take bold risks but behave cautiously, or conversely, they may act more aggressively than policies allow. Coaching helps identify these gaps and provides guidance for adjustment. For example, if a team consistently avoids experiments with uncertain outcomes despite having a mandate for exploration, coaching can reframe perceptions and build confidence. Alternatively, if a team repeatedly exceeds acceptable exposure, coaching ensures boundaries are respected. Calibration also strengthens consistency across teams, preventing one group from being overly conservative while another takes reckless risks. By aligning appetite with practice, coaching builds both confidence and discipline. This process reinforces motivation as teams learn to take risks proportionate to their context. Calibration ensures that experimentation is not only frequent, but also aligned with organizational values and safety thresholds. Telemetry and analytics pipelines automate the collection and analysis of experimental data. Without automation, data gathering is slow, error-prone, and demotivating. Automated pipelines capture signals reliably, segment cohorts, and store data for analysis, reducing manual burden. For example, a pipeline might automatically track click-through rates, error logs, and performance metrics for a new feature, feeding results into dashboards accessible to all stakeholders. Automation improves evidence quality and accelerates decision-making, allowing teams to pivot or persevere more quickly. It also lowers the barrier to running more experiments, since data capture becomes routine. By investing in telemetry infrastructure, organizations remove friction from the learning cycle, making experimentation less daunting and more motivating. Analytics pipelines thus support both the technical rigor and cultural habit of experimentation, turning motivation into continuous, reliable discovery. Remote-friendly rituals sustain motivation and inclusion in distributed teams. Practices such as concise pre-reads, asynchronous commentary, and recorded debriefs ensure that all members can participate fully in learning cycles. For example, a team might circulate a pre-read summarizing an experiment before holding an asynchronous discussion, allowing people in different time zones to contribute insights. Recorded debriefs capture lessons for future review and onboarding. These rituals reduce the risk that remote members feel excluded from decision-making or discovery. They also ensure that transparency is preserved across distance, reinforcing trust. Remote-friendly rituals require intentional design, but they pay off by keeping motivation high even in geographically dispersed teams. By making experimentation inclusive and accessible, these practices ensure that distributed environments do not dilute learning but instead expand it through diverse participation. Innovation accounting provides a disciplined way to measure the value of experimentation. Instead of focusing solely on traditional delivery metrics, it tracks cost to learn, exploration to exploitation ratios, and the conversion of validated insights into shipped value. For example, innovation accounting might show that a team spends 20% of its capacity on exploration, but consistently converts validated insights into high-value features. This evidence reassures stakeholders that experimentation is not wasteful but productive. Cost-to-learn metrics highlight efficiency in generating insights, while ratios balance the portfolio between discovery and delivery. By making experimentation measurable, innovation accounting validates its role as an investment rather than a gamble. It keeps motivation high by demonstrating tangible returns on curiosity and risk-taking. Over time, it also refines decision-making, showing where discovery capacity delivers the most value and guiding future strategy. Stakeholder communication during experimentation builds confidence and alignment. By explaining the purpose of experiments, the safeguards in place, and the criteria for next steps, teams reassure stakeholders that risk-taking is disciplined. For example, telling sponsors that a feature will first be tested with a limited cohort, with rollback readiness in place, shows both ambition and prudence. Communication also maintains trust when results lead to pivots or delays. By framing outcomes as learning, teams prevent disappointment from eroding confidence. Transparent communication reduces suspicion that experiments are arbitrary or self-serving, making stakeholders allies in discovery. This dialogue sustains motivation by showing that experimentation is supported and understood, not a secretive endeavor. Clear, proactive communication ensures that experimentation strengthens relationships as well as products, reinforcing the culture of responsible risk-taking. Impact assessment validates whether experiments produce meaningful improvements. Beyond immediate results, assessments evaluate whether learning accelerated decision-making, reduced rework, or improved outcome attainment. For instance, a failed feature test may still demonstrate success if it prevented months of wasted investment. Assessments highlight the value of evidence, not just positive results. They also provide feedback loops for refining experimental design and focus. By systematically measuring impact, teams show that experimentation drives real progress, motivating continued exploration. Impact assessment also reassures stakeholders that resources are well spent, as even null results contribute to smarter strategy. This discipline prevents experimentation from being dismissed as frivolous, anchoring it firmly as a driver of value. Over time, impact assessments build confidence that risk-taking is worthwhile, because every attempt either delivers direct benefit or yields actionable knowledge. Anti-pattern detection prevents unhealthy behaviors from masquerading as experimentation. Risk theater occurs when teams stage experiments for show without genuine learning intent. Sandbagged goals lower the bar artificially to guarantee success, while hidden failures conceal negative results to protect reputations. These patterns erode trust and distort culture. By naming and flagging them, organizations maintain integrity in experimentation. Transparent records, proportionate oversight, and clear learning goals help prevent these pitfalls. For example, requiring that every experiment log its hypothesis, metrics, and outcome ensures accountability. Leaders play a key role in reinforcing honesty, rewarding transparency even when results are disappointing. By confronting anti-patterns early, teams preserve motivation, ensuring that experimentation remains authentic and respected. This vigilance sustains a culture where learning is genuine, risks are proportionate, and discoveries drive continuous improvement rather than performance theater. Sustainment cadence keeps experimentation healthy over time. Regular reviews examine portfolio balance, retire stale bets, and refresh guardrails as context shifts. Without cadence, experiments may pile up without conclusion, or boundaries may become outdated. For example, a quarterly review might identify old hypotheses that no longer align with strategy and free capacity for more relevant ideas. Sustainment also allows adjustment of risk appetite, ensuring alignment with changing business conditions. By embedding this rhythm, organizations prevent experimentation from fading into chaos or inertia. Cadence reinforces that experimentation is not episodic but continuous, balancing discovery with delivery. It sustains motivation by keeping learning visible, ensuring progress remains steady, and preventing fatigue from unmanaged efforts. Over time, sustainment transforms experimentation from a series of initiatives into a lasting organizational capability, powering adaptability and innovation. Motivation synthesis emphasizes that intrinsic drivers, psychological safety, clear guardrails, and disciplined practices form the core of responsible experimentation. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose fuel curiosity and persistence. Transparent recognition, ethical boundaries, and rollback readiness make risk-taking safe and sustainable. Learning metrics, innovation accounting, and impact assessments prove that discovery delivers value, while anti-pattern vigilance preserves integrity. Together, these practices create a culture where experimentation is frequent, responsible, and outcome-focused. Teams are motivated not by fear or extrinsic pressure, but by the joy of discovery and the clarity of purpose. In such environments, risk-taking is not reckless but informed, and failures are not hidden but transformed into knowledge. Motivation, harnessed in this way, powers continuous adaptation and ensures that agile organizations deliver value reliably in uncertain conditions. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.